um, Office of Ratepayer Advocate. So basically what I am is the ratepayer advocate for the customers of the bundled utilities, Pacific Gas and Electric, for instance. So why am I here talking about community choice aggregation? Oh, Barbara. How are you, Barbara?
Sorry, I'm late.
Anyway, so I'm I have a history on community choice aggregation working for the city and county of San Francisco, apropos that Barbara just came in here, my former client. Um, the but from my perspective now, I'm representing bundled service customers, and I think that what I want you to know is that from the perspective of all ratepayers, is that competition in the market is good for the monopoly companies that are out there, and I know Ann wanted me to talk a little bit about what community choice aggregation is first, and I'm not sure about sort of the level of understanding with the current models of supplying power in California. But the first thing I wanted to ask you, so do people understand generally that you have investor-owned utilities that own the wires, and you have municipal utilities which own the wires, and sort of their different business models? Should I explain that? Anybody? Give me a show of hands, people that understand it generally. Okay, good. Well, let me just briefly say. So one model is that the investor-owned utilities are private, are investor-owned utilities. PG&E, Southern California Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, for instance. They own the wires and they buy or produce the power to sell to their customers. So that's one model. The California Public Utilities Commission regulates those industries as regulated monopolies. The second model is where a government does the same thing. The government, in the first model, PG&E, for instance, sends the bill to the customers for both the production of power or the buying of power and the delivery of that power. In the second model, the government does the same thing. So they own the wires, they either produce or buy the power, and they send their customers a bill. So they each have geographic ownership over those areas and those customers. Now, community choice aggregation, that's the hybrid. So in the case of CCA, the government entity buys or produces that power, and the IOU, the investor-owned utility, like PG&E, delivers that power. So in the case of the IOU, in the case of the CCA model, the IOU actually sends the bill to the CCA customer, which is also an investor-owned utility customer. So basically, the community choice aggregation customer is a customer of both the investor-owned utility and the community choice aggregator. Community choice aggregation is basically simply a program where local governments or group of governments can buy electricity and sell it to customers located in their geographic area, but without actually owning the wires. So once the CCA is formed, the electric customers within that geographic area are automatically part of that community choice aggregation community. And unless they individually decide to opt out, they are part of the community choice aggregator clientele. So the advantage to a CCA service is that the cost of entry for a local government or group of governments is quite low in regard to sort of getting into the power delivery business. And as compared to a municipal utility or a what's called a publicly owned utility, which is the legal jargon for that type of service, where they actually have to buy the wires. The CCA can choose its own mix of generation sources for its customers, and the CCAs don't have a natural profit motive like an investor-owned utility. They don't have to have a revenue plan for their shareholders. So the main disadvantage, though, is that the community choice aggregator has to compete with the entity that owns those wires, the utility. In this case, Northern California might be PG&E, because those customers can always go back to full bundled service with the utility. So that is basically a big disadvantage for community choice aggregation. But that being said, as representatives of the customers generally, I see the CCA service offers a lot of competition for the monopoly, and the just by being able to choose between PG&E and the CCA, the customers can exercise a lot of power, basically a lot of protection, which is the choice of two sources of power. So from my perspective, CCA service is therefore good for ratepayers. But local government officials have to answer to their constituents in the course of in the case of a CCA, and they have to be cost competitive unless they can offer other amenities that the customers also like. So under the current regime, though, the law allows CCAs to compete with investor-owned utilities in terms of the power source. So CCAs can choose the quality of the power, i.e. more renewables, different types of renewables. It also allows CCAs to run their own energy efficiency programs, which I think is a really big plus, because then a CCA can basically tailor energy efficiency programs to local needs. And I think CCAs are good for bundled service customers, the customers that I represent, because um, it basically incentivizes the IOUs, investor-owned utilities, to do a better job, sharpen their pencils, to be more customer friendly. But I don't think at this point the CCAs can um, sort of rest on those advantages in the long run. In the long run, I don't think the CCA can depend on cheaper and greener power to keep customers. Now, Marin and Sonoma have up and running good programs, for instance, and they're enjoying the opportunity to sell power to their customers at lower rates than the incumbent utilities, basically because of two main factors. First, there's a big flood of energy on the market, and resources in the market have been that way for about 5 years. And so I think that over the long run, Sonoma and Marin are going to have um, uh, opportunities to purchase power cheaper than the investor-owned utilities, but that sort of opportunity to do that is going to go away as this flood of energy decreases. The second factor is that PG&E, for instance, and the other investor-owned utilities like San Diego Gas and Electric and Southern California Edison, they have a lot of above-market contracts in their portfolio right now. Those above-market contracts have to be passed on to their customers. And so during this period of time where the CCAs can buy more cost-competitive green power, as those contracts with the investor-owned utilities sort of get weaned off, they're going to be becoming more competitive with the CCA's source of power. So the CCAs can offer better prices because they're not burdened with that portfolio of those legacy contracts. But over time, that will decrease as well. But that being said, I think that it's a really good time for CCAs to be created and take advantage of those opportunities to compete on price and compete on the source of power. But the CCA should not assume that the competitive advantage will last. And I think there's a unique opportunity now, though, for CCAs to sort of jump into the market, start their business, and then establish themselves as long-term competitors. Last year, AB 327 was passed by the legislature. It was to basically change the way, it was basically looking at different rate structures. But part of it was also requiring the investor-owned utilities to file what are called distribution resource plans with the California Public Utilities Commission, which they have to do so by July of next year. These plans are supposed to be an attempt to restructure the distribution grid and as an open platform for innovation. So I think that basically this is the opportunity for a big evolutionary event in the distribution network. And I think the problem is that the current distribution archetype, as you know, consisting of a centralized plan where electricity flows in one direction from the big power plants to the customers, is not workable if we're going to get to a sustainable energy future. And I think we have that slide up there that showed the distributed grid changing. I think that is the archetype of the future. The grid of the future has to have electricity moving in both directions. It has to handle big changes as energy flows and power. So the electric distribution grid of the future has to evolve to a more decentralized plan where the distribution energy resources, such as energy storage and energy efficiency, demand response, and renewable energy are optimized at the customer level. The distribution grid needs to be redesigned as an open and flexible system where the customer can easily build in or take advantage of these distributed energy resources, and where the rules don't favor the sort of the business plan of the investor-owned utilities. It basically has to get to a more plug-and-play environment where customers can come and go, where they can put in energy efficiency, they can put in demand response, storage, solar panels, or different types of renewable energy without it upsetting the system or without it being something that takes a very long process for them to accomplish. So I think the CCAs basically have the ability and the opportunity to shape that future on the distribution network. The incumbent utilities will naturally favor the control over the grid and defining the rules, but the customers of those utilities, including CCA customers, paid for that grid, so they should have some ownership over it and decide what the rules are. There's an opportunity now, actually, as we're speaking, there's an all-day workshop at the commission today on these distributed energy resources and these distribution resource plans that the utilities have to file. There's opportunity for stakeholders to get involved. I think that CCA should be one of those stakeholders, should be involved in basically writing the rules, writing the tariffs, developing the technology that basically is the grid of the future. And so it's really an opportunistic time. I would recommend strongly that community trace aggregators, if they haven't already, form trade associations. I know Marin and Sonoma are up and running strongly. Maybe they, if they haven't already, take leadership on helping other fledgling community trace aggregators or entities that are looking at that. Similar to like the Municipal Utilities Association. California Municipal Utilities Association, very strong entity which advocates for a mutual interest of the munis. I think CCA should do the same thing. Share resources, share information, and I strongly suggest that you get involved in what's happening at the PUC because the opportunity to jump into the CCA market I think is very strong right now, but it's not going to last, and so you have to look for other opportunities to satisfy your customers. And anyways, I think CCAs really are part of the future, and I think you should consider it strongly in your deliberation.